Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copilot Compass, where each week we take a deep dive into Microsoft 365 Copilot. As always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my esteemed colleague, fellow Copilot enthusiast, and resident smart guy, Logan.
Thanks, Grant. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Logan, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit more about what they can expect in this week's episode?
Yeah, so as always, we'll get started off with our question of the week, and then we'll get into our topic, which is GPT-5, specifically Copilot and GPT-5. So we're just going to be covering what that is, how it's different from GPT-4, and it should be interesting. And make sure you stay tuned to the end for a steep preview of what we have coming out next, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.
All right, let's jump into it.
Let's do it. Okay, so let's get into our question of the week. And remember, you can submit your own questions either by leaving a comment on this video or by emailing the email address in the description. So this week, our question is, how should leaders prepare their teams for working alongside AI copilots?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this could be its own series of episodes, not even just a single episode, but I think there's two kind of key points that I think are things often overlooked at organizations that I think are extremely important. The first is communicating like your why behind an AI implementation. So you don't want to just say, hey, AI is coming. This is cool technology. We're trying to keep up with it. So we're getting some AI coming into the organization. Because what a lot of people hear when you say that is, I'm going to be replaced by a machine. Now, that may not, in most cases, that's not people's goal. Your goal is to scale faster, be more efficient, try to basically do more with the same amount of resources from a human perspective as you have currently in place. It's not typically to replace people's jobs. So I think that even if you are going into AI with the best intentions for your team, you've just got to be very clear about that messaging from up front. Like, why is it coming in? What's in it for the employee? And then kind of, get ahead of those water cooler conversations. Because otherwise, without that messaging, if it's just all here's the technology, again, people kind of have those water cooler conversations and, can get the wrong impression, even, if that's not what your intention is. The other thing is to do some training on prompting. So, this is like, the analogy I like to use is, if you go into an organization and everybody speaks Spanish and you don't speak Spanish, it's difficult for you to be effective there because you can't speak that language. And prompting isn't necessarily its own language, but it's close. So you want to, really spend some time with your folks, teaching them good prompting habits. What are kind of some common mistakes that people make? What are some best practices around it? Because prompting really is a pretty low cost from a number of hours perspective to teach somebody really good prompting, health, but again, often overlooked. Like a lot of times we try to get into like agents that solve business problems, but at the end of the day, like, good prompting can do a lot. So again, I could go on about this forever. I know a lot of people are here to listen to us talk about GPT-5, but Logan, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a lot of good points. I do think that the training aspect of it is really important. It's definitely not really fair as a leader to just kind of hear about AI and then just kind of dump that on your employees without a support
Yeah.
system. Um, and then going off of that, a few weeks ago we did an episode on building a center of excellence for Copilot, and I think that's a super important thing you can do as a leader, to give your employees that support system to really flourish and adopt the technology. Yeah.
Yeah, good points. Well, again, good question. Too many things to think about for us to press on more with that. Let's get into our topic of the week.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so GPT-5, I think at this point, unless you live under a rock, you've at least heard of GPT-5. So what we're going to do is break it down, not in any real deep technical deep dive. That's not, we've never done that in these episodes. We're going to focus on like what it is, help you, feel a little bit more intelligent about it if your coworkers are talking about this stuff. But again, GPT-5 recent announcement coming out from OpenAI, as well as, directly with Microsoft and its integration into Copilot. So before we get into that, I think what is GBT? I mean, I think if you asked most people what GBT is and what the acronym stands for, I'd say probably vast majority of people in the business realm have no idea. So GBT, G stands for generative here. So it's going to generate things like text, in its early stages, just text, but now, longer text forms, images, stories, code, all these things. The P is pre-trained. So it means like you don't have to train this model. It's been trained for you. When you go use ChatGPT, it doesn't start out by saying, hi, Logan, tell me what knowledge sources you want to use for everything that you ever do. It's already trained on, the internet, basically. And then T is for transformer. So this is just what it helps. It's kind of uh, again, we're not going to do a deep technical dive here. Basically, it's like the way it kind of interprets and breaks down the relationships and words in a sentence. It's kind of, fancy way of saying here's how it all works. So again, GBT, generative pre-trained transformer. Now, the history of GBTs, I think when Logan and I were preparing for this episode, we kind of surprised. I mean, you forget how fast this stuff has really developed.
Yeah.
So GBT, the first version, GBT-1, was in 2018. And all this really did is show that you could train a LLM or large language model on internet, and it could produce a cohesive or a coherent sentence. And if you think about what you're using it for now, I mean, I had it help me with a crepes recipe last weekend. I had it build images for a PowerPoint deck that our team did. I've had it, review 200 pages worth of documents and kind of give it to me in a summary. We're considering where we were at in 2018 with just producing a sentence that makes sense. I mean, that is a crazy jump. But yeah, so we'll fast forward. We're not going to break down every model, but what we had been using up until August was GBT-4. So that came out in 2023. It had like the big jumps, I guess, like some of the big things that came out in GBT 4 was image creation, better reasoning, increase the context windows, which we're going to talk a little bit about in GBT 5, but in short, better memory of its, existing conversation. So with that, let's talk about what is GBT-5 and like what are we going to start to notice if you haven't noticed already as you start to use GBT-5 in Copilot. So it was released on August 7th of this year of 2025. It came out in Copilot the same day. So whether you're a Copilot chat user or an M365 Copilot user, you can see GBT-5 being available to you there. Now, again, what are the big improvements? Like the main points for us to understand as users and how can we, use this better? The first one is the larger context, and it really boils down to better memory. So what you'll see with this is within the same chat, it can remember more of the conversation. So, we like to use Copilot chat for research, like understanding new topics. And so you might be having to do some deep research, build you out a bigger report, and now you're going to ask questions of the report. But you may kind of get into one topic, ask a few questions there, get some answers, go switch topics a little bit, and then come back to that topic. With GBT-4, and I ran into this issue sometimes with these longer iterative things, it was like it'd kind of lose its train of thought or forget some information I'd given it 4 or 5 prompts earlier. So with GBT-5, you're really not going to run into that issue. So it's going to get larger context. That's a big one. It's also faster with complex tasks. So if you're asking it, my situation I brought up last week and asking Copilot for a crepes recipe, I'm not going to notice much difference there. It's a pretty simple question. Or if you ask it like a simple Q&A, like who was the 7th president of the United States? Quick quiz. You know who the 7th president of the United States was, Logan?
No, no.
Yeah, neither do I. Put it in a spot. So, but like those types of questions, you probably won't notice any difference. GBT-4 was plenty fast, but if you're asking it to explain quantum physics as if Albert Einstein was speaking, then you're going to notice an improvement in speed with those types of deeply complicated tasks. So the other big one here, and I think that this is really great for people that are new to using LLMs like ChatGPT and Copilot Chat, is the unified architecture. So before with Copilot Chat, like the personal free version, like you could kind of select, like quick response. I'm trying to remember exactly what the L word was, like quick response, There was like deep research. You had like four, I think, different options of, and by default it goes to that quick response. But like if you were trying to have it look for very specific information on a specific industry or specific company, you'd want that deep research. Like or if it's like new stuff, like things within the last couple of months, you want the deep research. And people just didn't like, a lot of times they didn't even know that that drop down selection was there. And if they did, like most people probably could get the gist, but not everybody. And it's not really crystal clear, like which types of prompts or questions should go into which category. So GPT-5 introduces this unified architecture, which automatically goes back and forth. Like it kind of looks at your prompt and does an initial assessment to say, is this something that I can do a quick response on, a deep response on, or sorry, quick research, deep research, or do I want to do smart research? It's kind of a blend of those items. So that's a big one, I think, from a user perspective. Like, if you're asking a very specific, very recent type of question and you've forgotten to switch to the deep reasoning, like you can end up with those hallucinations in GPT-4. But with GPT-5, it's going to recognize, okay, I need to transition to that deep research model to, you know, get the level of depth that my user is asking for. Now on that, I just touched on it, is the reduced hallucination. So I would say I noticed this, not a significant amount, but noticeable that, like you'd ask questions and a lot of times it was a user error. Like I didn't give it a great prompt, but it would like hallucinate things or make things up. And, obviously we're only a month in, but definitely haven't noticed that at all with the new release. Another big one that's a great user experience uh, improvement is we don't get the "I can't do that" message anymore. It's now "I can't do that because," or "here's why." So it's gonna, like that was, I'd hear from people like a frustrating experience. And a lot of times, like, I mean, I've had this happen multiple instances where somebody, like I ask, people that aren't existing customers of ours, like, "Hey, do you use generative AI. Oh, yeah, sure. Well, do you use Copilot Chat or Chat GPT? Gemini, what do you use?" And I'd say we get more Chat GPT than we do Copilot Chat. And a lot of times I'd ask, like, okay, why? And it's like, they'd say, oh, well, I used Copilot Chat once and it told me I couldn't do something. So I just assumed that Chat GPT worked better and I don't have that problem. Now, that realistically, they're built on the same model, but maybe you just got lucky with one versus the other, but they associate it with a problem with, Copilot Chat as an example. So this is much better. No longer does it just say I can't do it, but it's going to explain to you why it can't so that you can try to figure out, a way around it. So that's a really good one. The other one is just, yeah, I mentioned already those reduced hallucinations, not making things up quite as frequently, a lot more accurate. So it doesn't, this is not going to eliminate the need for you to validate, info that Copilot's giving you, but you're just going to find less mistakes, better quality there. So these are kind of the main key points of what's different with GPT-5 versus GPT-4. Again, you should already see this in your Copilot Chat or M365 Copilot, your tool of choice. It's not like it came out in OpenAI's ChatGPT and hasn't come out in Microsoft yet. It came out same day. So hopefully these will kind of help you understand some of the benefits of the new model, why the new model makes any difference, and sets your expectations as you start to use it. Logan, curious to get your perspective. I've got some ideas, like some noticeable things for me here, but we've been using this now for about a little bit over a month, maybe 5 weeks as we sit here today recording this episode. Anything that stands out to you that you've noticed as a big difference with GPT-5?
Yeah, I think the new memory retention has been pretty noticeable and quite
Yeah.
cool. Because in the past, it does feel like you're having a conversation, but if you reference something a little bit too far back, it just pretends like it doesn't exist or it recreates it in a slightly different way. Which kind of, put it kind of made like some sort of like brainstorming sessions a little bit more difficult if you're trying to like the
Yes.
things that you talked about
Yep.
previously. So being able to just kind of just talk about anything and assume that it's remembering what you said to it, has been great. I think that's been one of the biggest noticeable ones for me, at least. Yeah. What about you?
No, that's a good one. That's definitely something I've noticed for sure too, is, like I'll use it a lot for like research where I'm asking a lot of questions and it kind of, we're iterating, we're having like a convo, or I might have it work on like a layout for something, and I'm going to have like a lot of prompting back and forth to kind of get it to where I want it to be. And so sometimes it would forget with GPT-4. Definitely not seeing that yet with GPT-5. The other one I'd say is those reduced hallucinations. And it's not to say like GPT-4 made stuff up all the time. It didn't, but like it would happen. And granted, again, we're only 5 weeks into GPT-5 here, but I can't think of an instance where I've noticed something and been like, yeah, that's not right. So that's a big one. The other thing I would say too, like, I don't think it's been helpful for me personally, just because I use this stuff all the time, but not having to select deep research or quick response, that type of thing is just more convenient. Like I knew the differences and knew when to use which ones, but I think, I'm in the minority in that case. So that I think that's a big win for us, the users. But
Yep.
yeah, that's a little bit about GPT-5. Hopefully you can sound a little bit smarter around the water cooler next week. In today's journey of the Copilot Compass, we talked about GPT-5. We've all heard about it. Logan and I kind of broke it down a little bit for you of, what are the differences between GPT-5 and its most recent predecessor, GPT-4. Talked to you a little bit about the historical perspective and kind of took a walk back through a very, very brief history, but, an important one nonetheless. So hopefully you feel a little bit more informed about what you can expect with this new release and sound a little bit smarter with your colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that since, the transition from GPT-4 to GPT-5 is all kind of under the hood. It's not necessarily stuff you would notice immediately, especially if you're just using, GPTs or just, kind of basic uses. But hopefully, like some of the things that we highlighted, you'll start to notice, as you continue to use whatever GPT you're currently using. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see how the technology is progressing. So yeah, if you enjoyed, feel free to give us a like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, we have our Q&A sessions every episode, so please give us those questions. And new episodes come out every Tuesday.
Yeah, next week we're going to talk a little bit about Copilot and marketing. So we're going to focus specifically on a few marketing use cases. It's not going to be a crazy deep dive, but we're going to show you like a good 2 to 3 kind of take-home scenarios to get you started in implementing AI in your marketing team. So hopefully you find that valuable. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.